Yep. We're good for a quorum?
So we're okay. We've got just.
Okay. Can I invite councillors to take their seats and we'll reconvene? Can I just note, Councillor Hapeta has indicated she needed to leave to go home and she intends to be online for the balance of the meeting. She's not online yet, but she will in due course. We're now up to item 11, which is the Railway Land Reserve proposal to grant a lease to Tecton Limited, deliberations report. And can I invite Bill Carswell, who is the Activity Manager for Property Services, to the table. Also, Kathy Dever-Todd, who's the Group Manager for Parks and Logistics. Good morning.
And the acting Chief Infrastructure Officer, which is why I'm at the table.
The acting. Great. Welcome.
I'm still Bill Carswell, sorry. Good morning, Mr Chair. Good morning, councillors. If I can, I'd leave that report to be taken as read, please, and answer any questions.
Okay. Open it up for any questions. Perhaps if I could kick off one, if that's okay. There's been an adjustment to the lease terms, and from what was originally 2,000, as I understood it, in the previous term, and then it ratchets up to 3,000. Was there much consideration of going higher than that, Bill? Is this your consideration that's been put into this report?
Excuse me, my understanding is that that's part of a negotiation process between the lessee and council, and it was a balance of the feeling that the rental should be higher, the ground rental should be higher, and the fact what he could bear in terms of as is reflected in his business plan.
Was there any consideration, or why isn't there a right of renewal being added to the 5 years after the investment and the growth that's intended through the business plan? Why that wasn't sought, or why that isn't proposed?
No, I'm not sure why that wasn't, but that would be unusual. Yeah.
Can I just comment? This is the first time I've seen some of the figures with the cost to participate being suggested at $100 per activity participant, with consideration of some groups of school people coming. Initially, so can I understand, because originally in the previous term we understood it was going to be around $40 was the proposition for an activity use, how it's gone to 100 and where the community benefit or community access conversation's gone to get to this point?
Well, I think he's updated his costs and looked at a break even. So then that's reflected in his business plan and his reporting.
Can I just draw your attention to the bottom of page 131, where they talk about $45 per participant, which is a school or community group type model, and understand that there is going to be different types of clientele, the corporate clientele and that group, and acknowledges there that there probably is a maximum price there of 45, which is similar to the 40 you talked about earlier.
Yeah. Can I also understand is where in that same page that they've got that for the viability at that sale price, that they'll also have to have some product offerings, high-end product offerings, and maybe some subsidised revenue from, example, funding grants to support those activities at that rate? Is that how I'm understanding it?
That's as I understand it as well, but I'd have to follow through just to confirm that.
And would it be limited, are you aware, is it just limited that participants can only access that activity if they're in a group? Can they not come up as an individual to have an activity at a similar rate?
My understanding is that the way the model works is you need people on site. You need a minimum number of people on site to manage obviously the participants and the safety, and the only way to do that is through doing group bookings.
So yeah, the groups will be batched up, so you have to book to allow for the opening of it with a satisfactory number of staff. Yeah.
Therefore, can I just ask a follow-up question? If it's promoted as a tourism activity and there's a family or a couple that come to town and want to participate in the activity, are they therefore limited because they can't just roll up and just book the activity as a couple? They need to kind of book in a larger group. Is that your understanding?
Well, I think he's going to have an online presence, so that maybe could overcome that. But yeah, you'll need a minimum number of people to run the facility.
Which is not an uncommon model in other tourism facilities around New Zealand. If you were to take, say, for example, a scenic flight, you can't book two of you to take a scenic flight. You get batched up with people to fill the plane. It's the same with many activities, particularly in the South Island, where you've got a group type activity. And obviously through the website is how you do the booking.
Okay, open it up for other members who have questions. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions around the pricing. My reading of page 131 leaves me with some questions about what level of certainty the community has about $45 actually being available to school groups. Can you provide any comment about whether we have certainty on that?
Not really, no. I'm just relying on the assumptions that he makes within his business plan.
Can I just draw councillors' attention to the fact that this is a report on the licence, and there's only certain things that council can manage and control through a licence for an activity to occupy council land. Those are included in the licence terms and conditions. It's not in the interest of the person taking out the licence to not be sustainable. I do appreciate, however, councillors, that you may have a concern about the pricing, but the report in front of you is about whether we issue a licence or not.
So can I take from that that there's no ability for council to control a community rate through a licence?
Under the licence you have in front of you, there is no ability within the licence as proposed to set a maximum rate. That is correct.
And that's come about through officers' advice, or is that something that a council's precluded from doing by law?
No, I don't think it's come from council. I think this is that's his business model that he's put forward in support of this.
Thanks. So I guess what I'm trying to be very clear about then is that if, as council, we wanted to see $45 rates available for school groups, et cetera, we could make that a condition if we so chose today.
You could put forward as part of the licence $45, whether then the licence would go ahead.
Yeah.
Because obviously in a situation if a licensee knowingly is going to not be sustainable, then they would seek some other way of compensating that. And so that is something that could be done, but I would suggest it would mean that probably the licence wouldn't go ahead.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've covered off most of my questions. How many other high ropes activities do we have in the city?
None that I know of.
None? No, okay. Just comparing it with local outdoor communities. But there isn't any to compare it with. So I'm right on my math, I think. 2,500 works out to $48 a week. 3,000 takes it up to a whopping $57 a week. And charging individuals $100 a go. Is that how I understand it? Okay. Okay, that covers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the report. I'm just interested in section 3 of the report on the comment around community good and how that might be assessed.
Where's that?
So if I understand your comment correctly, the community good focuses on the benefit of having an outdoor activity available to the community. And there's also a comment about, not being able to quantify easily, but would not community good be able to be assessed by accessibility criteria in terms of, is this an affordable activity to people in the community, or is this business offering a certain number of concessionary rates to particular groups? Or I'm wondering if you think there's any way in which the community goods section of this assessment could be enhanced. It's on page 119 of the order paper, section 3 of the report, talking about alignment to council's goals.
The only sort of way that I would look at that would be to put some parameters in for charging and to vary the licence to have a maximum charge and a minimum number of usages. And that may preclude him wanting to proceed again.
But was not your advice as officers that we shouldn't do that a few minutes ago?
So, Council, this isn't the only licence you have of a park or reserve in the city. We have a number of commercial licences, including things like mobile food vendors located in Te Maraea Hine. In those cases, we incorporate aspects into the licence which relate to general community good, like the requirement to use recyclable packaging and manage your own rubbish and those types of things. It would be unusual for council to put something into the licence of the nature that is being proposed in terms of pricing. However, you could, as we do with some of our other licences, put in reporting requirements that we could require them to report back or provide information back to council on the number of groups that have accessed it. That would be a thing that would not be onerous on the licensee, and is something that as a licensor you could include within it.
Well, that's a very helpful suggestion. Do you need it to come through in a recommendation?
Sorry.
No. As the recommendations are as proposed, the Group Manager of Property and Resource Recovery has the ability to negotiate the terms of the licence. What we're asking you to is agree to him to be able to do that by asking in recommendation 1 that we grant a licence. But that's a relatively minor amendment that doesn't have any, doesn't change the intent of the licence as presented in the report.
Okay, so if council thought that that was a good idea, how would we get that message across? Am I just going to make comment about it and you'll just take note, or does it need a recommendation? That's what I'm asking.
No, I think that given what there is within officer delegation, as long as we have recorded that, which I'm getting a nod, then we will ensure that Bryce takes that in consideration in finalising the licence.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question around recommendation 2, where it says limit is designated as part of lot PD 76518. Now that doesn't mention any size, so is there anything limiting him from expanding? Because it just says, it's part of the lot. It doesn't say which area at all.
No, I apologise for that. The area is contained within the earlier reports, and the licence will definitely limit the area on which they can undertake the activity. Just bearing in mind, this isn't a lease of a piece of land. It is a licence to operate in an area of the reserve. That doesn't preclude people from moving through that, which is why you don't have an area. But in effect, where the structures are currently is the area that.
And that's written somewhere to say that he can't expand?
In the licence, yeah.
It is, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to follow up your question earlier about the right, having no right of renewal, so if this licence is granted, what happens at the end of 5 years?
It terminates, so it ends. What would normally happen is that the two parties would get together and renegotiate another term.
And that would come back through the chamber
Yes.
for a new
Yes, it would.
licence to be operated? Okay, thank you.
Part of the thing with this, it's a little bit of a tricky thing, it's a Reserves Act thing, because it's a licence and not a lease. There's limitations on what the term and how long licences can be for. So in this case, that's why we don't have a renewal on it.
Can I, just as a comparison, you mentioned the hawker licences with food vendors. How much is a food vendor in the square needing to pay to have their commercial activity? Just as a comparison.
That's a question I didn't think you'd ask me. I'm sorry, I don't know that offhand, because the food vendors also have access to a power supply. In a park, it's set under your fees and charges, and where they're just occupying an area of land, it's $500, I think, per 6 months. But in the square, it is slightly different because they're accessing other things.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. Is there... Oh, yeah, Mr. Chief Executive.
Yeah, through the chair. Just coming back to the points about potentially adding to the licence a community rate, I'd just caution elected members around that, for the reason is that if we do choose to put that into a licence agreement, there is a possibility that the provider of the service may not it may not be affordable for them, and therefore they may not make it open to community groups at all. So I just suggest that perhaps officers might need to think about other ways in the licence of ensuring that community groups, that it is available for community groups, and how that is accessed.
Okay, thank you. Is there somebody prepared to move the recommendations in the report? Councillor Naylor, seconded Councillor Bowen. Open it up for comments and debate. Councillor Johnson.
Did we want to allow the mover first speech?
That's a fair point too. Councillor Naylor, and I'll come back.
Thank you. I'm really happy to support the progression of this licence. I think there's no doubt from the information that's been gathered through the submissions that there is significant value to our community to have this available. In particular, the fact that there is nothing else like this provided in our city is a good reason, I think, for us to remind ourselves that we do want to be an enabling council, and we do want to be a council that sees business succeed. And so I think I'm very comfortable with what's been outlined here. I hear that there are some reservations about wanting to make it accessible. However, we do need to ensure that this moves forward in a way that gives the business the best chance to succeed, because then we will actually have this available to our community. So I'm really happy to support and encourage the rest of you too.
Councillor Johnson, I wonder if I just might reserve your right to speak, because there's an additional amendment that you might want to make comment on and capture that in your thoughts. If, with respect, can I offer you that? And then Councillor Hancock, I understand you've got an amendment, or? Councillor Barrett's got the amendment. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am happy to speak, but would indicate that I don't currently have a seconder for that amendment.
You can put it up and seek one.
So if there is interest, in my view, having heard from the Chief Executive, we would want to make sure that anything we do in the community and school pricing space is real and doesn't just turn into a hypothetical offering, but is a rate that's actually, in fact, available to the community. So I would like to see us include a $50 or less community rate, because I think it would be reasonable and appropriate to ensure that we do have good levels of community access. And I don't actually see that undermining the overall business model. What it does is encourages the business operator to ensure that the corporate pricing is set at a level that it actually balances that out. So that would be my preference, is that we do include that in the, just check the wording here. Yeah, so that would be my preference if there is a seconder. If not, obviously it'll lapse for lack of support at this stage.
Okay, I'll open it up. Is there a seconder to support the amendment? Nope.
Thanks, I think that's quite clear then, the fate of that ultimately. Look, overall on this, you know, I would like to see this activated for all the reasons that everyone continues to describe. My concern is around broad community availability, so I'll watch with interest as it develops, and certainly if it ends up being something that only serves part of the community, I'll be wanting to revisit this in future.
Thank you, Councillor. Excuse me. Councillor Johnson, back to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am going to support this, although, as you are all aware, I've had my concerns about the operation. However, I would note that the operator has, done everything that we've required of them to get to this point, and has provided reasons for why they haven't been able to make this the sort of active focus of outdoor activity that we were all hoping initially. What I would like to see, though, is, as officers suggested we might be able to do without putting too much pressure on the operator, to introduce a reporting requirement on community good in the licence itself, so that we do have some assurance that this activity, which is taking up a significant part of public land, does provide community good. And I think, given that the officer said that they didn't think that would be too onerous on the operator, that is the route that I would prefer to go down, rather than the route of specifying costs, which I think is a step too far, really, in terms of how we might deal with people who have licences to operate on our land. So I am still concerned that there be some community good from this activity on public land, because I think that is what fits in with our policy around the use of public land. And the public good to me is more than just the benefits that people might get from doing an outdoor activity. Public good, is around providing perhaps some concessions to, some parts of the community that wouldn't otherwise have access. So I'm encouraged by the officer's comments that they feel that that could be incorporated without too much trouble. And I think that that will give us the oversight that we're looking for in terms of being able to feel comfortable that this is an appropriate use of public land. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yep, very much in support of taking the step of granting a licence to the applicant here, and particularly in support of the points Councillor Johnson has made about requiring a reporting element into the licence. And colleagues, I think this reflects nicely our conversation with our CCOs just a couple of weeks ago about asking people to consider who uses their facilities, and the way we do that is to ask them to report on it, to drive an active consideration of which parts of our community are accessing a service and which might not be, and then we can think about what flows from that. But the other element of community good that I see in granting this licence, and I offer maybe as a thought to officers, is about crime prevention through environmental design. We know it makes spaces safer when spaces are activated. And so I'm interested to understand what proportion of time the railway land is being activated by the use of this facility, which makes the whole of the railway land a safer space for people to use for their own individual recreational use of green space. And I think that's an element that could usefully come through the reporting as well, in terms of the amount of time this facility is actually operating. Thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm supportive of this as well. I realise there's quite a bit of angst around the room. This has been around the mulberry bush a few times, and look, you do have to wonder at times why people do want to come and deal with us at certain times. I realise it's public land, and I get that, and I realise the angst around community use. But as an enabling council, sometimes we just need to get out of the way and take advice from our officers, and I do like the advice around perhaps the reporting side. I think that would be really helpful once a year or whatever the officers deem necessary, and again making sure it's not too onerous, but giving us some insight, because there's a bit of gut feeling going on around the room, and having run a facility not on public land, actually it is quite hard to do these things, and it's even harder if you've got what I call some barriers in place. So please do support this. We've taken them this far. If this fails, it's not a great look on us. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm sensing that we're going to get this over the line. Apologies to Councillor Barrett for me leading him on over the potential amendment. The only thing I'm going to add to the comments already made really is that there are a couple of check-in points here in terms of the performance of the operation, one of which is the 5-year no automatic right of renewal, and the second one, of course, is the performance reporting as and when requested. And, of course, we can catch, there could be a catch-all there in terms of community good in that part of it. So, like, the infrastructure is already in place. We've made decisions in previous councils to allow this activity in this location. So as a council, I think we just need to ensure that we facilitate the venture and ensure that it is financially viable going forward. So I will be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I struggle with this one, to be really honest. This is a commercial venture, first and foremost. And to get rent at $48 a week is pretty good by anybody's standards. I do support the fact that it's excellent for us to have activities in the city. I do back that. That's where I'm struggling with this, which way I want to go with it. I like the option that after 5 years it comes back and we get the chance to renegotiate again and we get reports on it. I agree with 90% of the points that have been put around the room. Getting out of the way, I'm just not sure about, Mr. Mayor. If any other commercial ventures wanted to take up our space, would we get out of the way? I hope so. A lot of our community activities in the city pay a whole lot more than $48 a week for their space. So, yeah, like I say, I'm struggling. I'm probably dribbling. I'm not sure still where I'm going. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll comment. I feel the fact that in some ways I don't feel like we've landed this well. The licensing terms as far as the value is very community-minded, considering a commercial operation. And again, at the 2,500 on the first year and even up to 3,000, it's really not a lot per week. Considering the product pricing page where it's $100 to participate in this activity, and with some vagary around how the school group opportunity works, whether the extra funding grants are needed or the purchase of high-end product offerings to support the lower value price. But at $100 per person, that very quickly starts paying off the lease with, you know, the first 25 people across the line. And at groups of size of 8, that's, you know, a little more than 3 groups will pay for this lease. The other aspect is around the opportunity for tourism. And I had pictured that people that were visiting the city would be able to have opening hours where they could come up and actually pay for an activity and actually have that on-the-spot opportunity to go, oh, let's enjoy Palmerston North, instead of finding that it's not open because they haven't grouped in a sizable booking. So where's that front door opportunity for those tourists to engage, even if they wanted to pay $100 for that activity, to go and have that on a 1 or 2 person basis? And so that being left unknown does concern me. The other point is around accessibility. When there's so many young kids there on the skateboards and their scooters and stuff, looking over at that activity, when I know that there'd be a good many of them that would be stretched to even pay the $45 per go, just right next door to them. I just feel the accessibility of having this on prime city land, knowing that there'll be many families that are just looking there. When I've compared that to the feedback when we put in the hydro slides at the Lido Aquatic Centre, the same sort of response from families concerned at the price point of entry and for the experience was concerning for them, knowing that this is a lot more than a hydro slide ride at the Lido. And yet it's in front of most children that are playing or driving past to have that limitation for a community good aspect. And when it's on a commercial basis, it doesn't have to be in the centre of town. This looks like it's a group activity where people, if they're prepared to pay $100, aren't going to need to walk there to be in Central City. This could be somewhere else on private land and on private arrangements. When we, as our shop window for the city, are giving a commercial opportunity on a very minimal commercial terms to have profiteering opportunity at the consequence of access, I find that just hard to compel. So for those reasons, I'm going to oppose this proposition. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just listening to the discussion, there are a few additional points I just would like to make. I think to say that this is profiteering opportunity fails to acknowledge the cost of restart, which is outlined in our report of $35,000, and the cost to operate of $32,000. If people are only looking at the cost of the lease, then that's a very short-sighted way of looking at this venture. And I think the other thing that as council, we have many discussions about many things that are, have community good, and most of those things we pay for or we contribute towards. Council contributes in some way. This is something that this is an organisation. They're not asking us for anything in terms of money. They're asking us for the use of some public land. And I agree with the points that Councillor Bowen has made in terms of perhaps that being a benefit in terms of crime prevention. I think it adds to our city centre vibrancy to have it in the centre. I think for those who often sit at this table and say, let's get rid of red tape, I think we're trying to add a whole lot of accountability for something that is essentially going to pay us money and give community good. Yes, I wish there were a lot of things that were cheap or free in this city, but that would not be commercially viable. So I think to actually have the opportunity for this for our community is a lot more, there's a lot more advantage to that than perhaps the things that some people are focusing on. So I really encourage, if we want to be an enabling council, we've got to say yes to this.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, now invite a vote. That's passed. 9 votes for, 2 against and 1 abstention. Thank you. That moves us on to item 12, which is the amendment to the Palmerston North Traffic and Parking Bylaws 2018 Light Motor Vehicle Prohibitions Deliberations Report, and welcome Stacey Solomon, Policy Analyst, to present.
Ngā mihi o te ata, kora mātua, kai kanihira. I'm pleased to bring you this paper for your deliberations on the Traffic and Parking Bylaw Amendment. This paper follows a process of community consultation and the hearing of submitters by the committee. You'll have noted in the paper we have proposed further changes to the bylaw in response to submissions we have received. The changes have been made primarily to improve the clarity and readability of the bylaw, as well as to align it more closely with the applicable legislation. I'd like to note that the changes made do not alter the original intention of the bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll just have one for the first one. On page 192, which is part of the register, the second line, it's got less than the 3,500 kgs, but in the report it's got not exceeding as amendments through. Has that been missed, or is that intentional that it remains?
No, that is an oversight. We can correct that. That should also read not exceeding.
Okay, thank you. Just an amendment there. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Thanks, Stacey. I just had a question about the exempted vehicles. So there's a line about emergency vehicles being exempted, and then in 24.2 it says the restriction should not apply to medical practitioners such as doctors, district nurses and midwives. Would that are they just examples? So what I'm thinking is, are there other medical or even veterinary professionals that would classify as being emergency exempted vehicles? Or do we need to include them, like name them?
My understanding is that the intentions of the clause are that anybody attempting to render some sort of emergency assistance or aid would be naturally exempted from the clause. We could include further detail, but we would need to look into that further.
Okay. How much does the, I guess that goes to a second question, which is, how much is the enforcement of this going to be at the discretion of police?
That's a good question. The enforcement of this bylaw is entirely at the discretion of the police.
Okay. I'll have a think about your answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Mayor.
Kia ora, Stacey. Thanks very much for the work. Have the police fed into this?
Yes, the police have been part of this process from the very beginning, so they are aware of the content of the bylaw and the proposed application of it and their part in that application.
Right. And obviously the admin manual, like all of our bylaws, just gives officers the flexibility to make some tweaks. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thanks, Stacey. My question's more around where to from here. If we assume that this is adopted today, how long would we be waiting before there'd be a full review of the overall traffic and parking bylaw?
Ngā mihi tō pātai, Councillor. Thank you for your question. I think that the Chief Planning Officer may have a response to that.
Great, thank you.
Through you, Mr Chair. We received your correspondence this morning, Councillor Barrett, so thank you. We were able to have a bit of a chat as a team. So I've been advised that the traffic and parking bylaw doesn't have a lapse period like the other bylaws. That said, there is an obligation on us to make sure that that is continued to be sort of reviewed and maintained to make sure it's up to date and addressing issues. So at this stage, we're looking at planning a review of this bylaw as part of the work program, as part of the next LTP, potentially in year 1 or 2 of the next LTP. We have a significant work program between now and the next LTP in terms of strategy, policy review and contributions to the LTP. So I think if there was any desire to look at an advanced review of the traffic and parking bylaw that would need to look closely at what we're not going to do or additional resources. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, that's helpful. If I were to, could I follow up just to understand if, like we've done here around trying to address a specific issue, if we asked for a targeted review that specifically looked at establishment of heavy vehicle routes, what sort of call that would be on staff time, and what sort of timing could we achieve with that kind of review?
Just to clarify your question, is it about the establishment and enforcement of heavy vehicle routes or the establishment of heavy vehicle routes? Because there's a topic, the report we had in February dealt with the two matters, one being the identification of heavy vehicle routes, and we have a briefing this afternoon about the strategic networks. The second part of that is the enforcement of heavy vehicle routes, which is, I suspect that's the intent behind your question, but just want to clarify.
Well, the question's around if we as council decided that we wanted to see this bylaw further amended to establish heavy vehicle routes in the city, what timeline could we expect to see around that if we did make that decision?
So I guess just to answer that question, the first thing is our advice would be that a bylaw is not the best mechanism to establish heavy vehicle routes. It's potentially a mechanism to enforce heavy vehicle routes. However, in terms of the time frame, I'd need to check in with the team. I mean, ultimately, it would, as I said earlier, it would require, I think, either external resources, because staff capacity between effectively than us next 12 to 18 months with policy review is full. So, but it would be I'd imagine a 12 to 18 month exercise.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Hapeta online.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Stacey, for your work you've done today. My question's around the number of submissions you got was 296. 140 was in favour and 100 was against. It's quite a polarising issue. So with it not being 100% people in favour of this, how are we going to bring the public along with us when we go to implement this bylaw going forward?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. It certainly wasn't as clear of a consultation as perhaps we might have hoped, but I don't know that we can ever expect to have 100% in favour of the proposals we're making. In terms of the way we bring the community along on the process of implementation, we are working on a communications and engagement plan to discuss with our community what the light motor vehicle prohibitions mean, how people can expect to be affected by them, how they won't be affected by them as well is quite important. And certainly getting some consistent messaging around that it is meant to be, in the first instance, in a way of achieving greater road safety for everyone in the community, and then to, effectively to try and have people understand that that is the purpose of the bylaw amendment.
Stacey, sorry, Chairman, another follow-up question. Did this give you information to make you want to change the bylaw in any way, with so many people being against it?
No, and I think you'll have seen from the changes that we did propose to make that we still believe that the approach we've considered here is the correct one. Though we did have 100 people who said they didn't support the bylaw, we still had more who said they did.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair. Nei rā te mihi ki a koe, Stacey whakarite pai tēnei. Thank you for preparing the report. With regards to page 144 at the bottom, just above point 5 consultation, The comment is, in future, council may choose to add or delete prohibited roads as necessary following an appropriate engagement process. How long would that engagement process be?
There is no set length of engagement process, but I would expect it might take anywhere from the starting point being an identification of a road for the prohibition, discussing that with relevant community stakeholders, interested parties, bringing that to the council and carrying out engagement. It could be anywhere from 4 to 6 months to make that change.
Also, from your perspective, we wouldn't be able to respond to a situation promptly, could we, if that was the case?
How prompt do you consider promptly?
Probably quicker than most. But thanks, Stacey. I think you've answered what I needed to know. Thank you. Kia ora, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Stacey, for the report. Just a point of clarification just from Councillor Harpeter's question. We actually had, can you just confirm for us, please, 140 people in favour and 55 people in support, at least in part, so that's 195 to 101. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, that would be a fair assessment.
Yep, 2 to 1. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Stacey. Yes, okay. I'm happy as Chair to remove the recommendations seconded by Councillor Naylor, just noting that the recommendations are across 2 pages on screen. They are as noted in the agenda. Open it up for comment and debate. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm going to support this. I mean, it's been a bit of a journey even to get to this stage. It's no silver bullet, we know that, and just want to acknowledge the staff and the work that's gone in. It has been a little bit polarising, but I think to Councillor Hancock's sort of acknowledgement, it is 2 to 1, and probably if you put it out a bit further, I think it might end up being about 8 or 9 to 1. But at the end of the day, we've got an issue. The country's actually got an issue too with this boy, or I shouldn't say boy,
Street
racing. I've got to get that right. But it's actually the antisocial stuff that comes with it, and that's the stuff that we've got to get on top of. With the heavy traffic stuff, I don't think we need to go down, at this stage, saying to trucks you can't. You're going to get fined if you go down a certain road. Will become extremely unpopular and actually act against some of our major economic strategies around distribution and logistics. The way to fix that is actually to get the ring road, freight ring road built. So we should be putting our efforts into that, and I encourage councillors to be thinking in that vein. But I'm very happy to support this, and it's just one tool. The police will have a view on it. I'm glad that they've been feeding into it as well, but it's just one tool of many we'll need to get on top of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, obviously I've been a proponent for this throughout, so I support the bylaw and the amendments as provided. Street racing and drifting has been a perennial issue, not only in our city but across New Zealand for many years. And the police actually came forward and actually made a submission in respect of this, and they expressed their frustration in terms of the tools they have at their disposal to actually deal with these large gatherings. And we actually saw video evidence of a police car actually trying to actually get to the location where these people were actually doing burnouts, and how the participants there actually blocked in the police vehicle. And I suspect for the police officer at the time, that would have been quite a frightening experience. So they've also explained that this is actually part of a wider solution in terms of managing this, which is antisocial behaviour. We listened to many submissions from members of the public, and that clearly demonstrated the sheer distress caused by these gatherings and the antisocial behaviour of those people involved in this. So I think really just to summarise, there will be some displacement, but there are some strategies that are being trialled elsewhere in New Zealand in terms of road surfacing, which provide actually some cheaper options in terms of how we actually manage these gatherings and the ability to skid vehicles on our roadways. So I look forward to seeing those changes coming forward in due course. This is really about supporting our community and sending a very clear message to those that use this pastime to be antisocial in our community, and to clearly advise them that their antics really are not welcome in our community. And again, this is just one strand in many layers that will make our community a safer place. So please support this and send that message to the community. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say that I too will be supporting this, and I think that there will be a whole lot of people who will be able to sleep better at night and be more assured. I mean, they were distressed, the people who came and gave submissions to us, and I support everything that Councillor Hancock and the Mayor have mentioned about this kaupapa, which is really important and significant. Can I say my only concern is that should people be take this elsewhere, that it will take some time if we have to go and be engaged in a process, and the ability to react swiftly and appropriately would be a concern for me, just the time delay. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to acknowledge the many members of the community who are affected by the very inappropriate street racing activities that are happening in and around this community, to acknowledge the many community members who have had their say during this process, and to say that I'm absolutely fully in support of this, while acknowledging it is not a complete solution or even a perfect one in any sense. It is part of a range of solutions in terms of how we can respond more effectively to the street racer issues that we have. As you will have picked up in my questioning and from some of the earlier reports this year, I think that this street racer issue isn't the only transport kind of issue that we face, and I'm still interested around the impact that the heavy vehicle traffic on a wide range of residential streets is having in our city, and would like us to contemplate whether we want to be in a position where we're waiting for Pinati to be built for years and years and years, or whether we might want to take some action more proactively. I won't be seeking any further recommendations on that today, but just to perhaps give notice of motion around where we might want to go to realize some of the benefits of actually getting heavy vehicles onto priority routes for a whole range of reasons behind that I won't unpack at this point. But to return back to the specific matter at hand, very much appreciate the diligence that staff have shown in shepherding this through, and hopefully it will be part of a suite of tools that can be better used in this community to keep our roads safer and a lot more better sleep at night for a lot of residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting this, just to see if it works at all. The people we're mainly putting this into action for don't follow any rules now. It's going to take a police presence and a big presence to stop them. So that'll be interesting, because the comments were made about videos we've seen. In those videos, we've seen 1 or 2 cop cars pull up and get peed on, their tyres let down, pushed and treated, and then they back off out of there. Are we going to have the numbers of police to go in and deal with it? We can put all the laws in we want to, all the options, but they have to be enforced by the police. So I'm going to vote for it and watch with bated breath as to what happens.
Thank you. There's no further comments. I'll now invite a vote. That's passed, 12 votes for and none against. Item 13, can we invite Stacey back to present the review of the Palmerston North Dog Control Policy 2018 and the Palmerston North Dog Control Bylaw 2018.
Kia ora nō koutou. This memorandum informs the committee that staff are shortly to begin work on the review of the dog control policy and bylaw. It provides a brief outline of the process we are proposing to follow for that review, so happy to answer any queries you have.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Kia ora nō Stacey. Just a question around section 5 of the report, which is scope of the policy and bylaw review. And you've indicated that there are some possible changes identified as part of the initial assessment. I wonder where those possible changes came from. Is it just from complaints, or are there other things that feed into that?
It's a combination of things. So in some cases it is complaints. In other instances, in here we've identified possible changes. One of them is reviewing areas where we have prohibitions on leash areas and off-leash areas. I think that's an important part for us to be reviewing continuously with this bylaw. Anyway, we have a lot of different users of our public spaces, so continuing to ensure that they are appropriate for our users and for our dogs is important.
So, in terms of doing that kind of assessment of where changes might be proposed, I'm wondering if you go out further than just information perhaps that council might hold. Do you go out to specific focus groups or parts of the community that might have different insight?
We do. We have a list of identified stakeholders and partners that we engage prior to proposing any changes. I think that is to ensure that we are getting a whole picture of what it is we are intending to be doing with our regulatory controls such as this.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. There's no further questions. I'm happy to move the recommendation, seconded Councillor Naylor. Open it up for comment or debate. There being none, I'd now like to invite a vote. That's passed, 12 votes for and none against. Our next item, item 14, invite Bill Carswell back to present this report, which is 117 Vogel Street, proposal to continue supporting Te Kohanga Reo National Trust Board, Te Awhina Kohanga Reo, by notifying the intention to grant community occupancy via a lease of council land. The floor is yours.
Good morning again. This is a report which I'd also like to be taken as read, please, and it just simply puts forward Council's intention to carry on and inform the public. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open
Any questions?
Yep, open it up if there's any questions. There's no questions. Thank you, Bill. Straightforward report. Appreciate that. I'm happy to move the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up for any comment. There being none, I'd like to invite a vote. Yep. This passed 10 votes for and none against. Yep. That moves us on to our next item, which was the remit to Local Government New Zealand 2023 Annual General Meeting. Hannah, are you presenting anything here? Yeah. Are there any questions on this item? straightforward. I'm happy to move the recommendations in this report, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up for any comments. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Have read through the late item and happy to support it, but it will be interesting to see its journey from here. It's quite narrow in focus. It's talking about repair and maintenance budgets just on the state highway network. I think if you look anywhere in the transport network in this country, you've got significant maintenance deficits, as we've just seen with Kiwi Rail, et cetera. So I would have preferred if the Mayor of New Plymouth would have taken a broader context on this and talked about transport across the board. But having said that, I'm willing to support it even though it is exceedingly narrow in focus.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, having had a discussion with Mayor Holdham, and perhaps just replying to the councillor's queries, it is narrow on purpose because we need to start somewhere. We take a broad brush approach, and I'm not disagreeing with the previous comments, but we just need to start somewhere. And if you look at where we are, it is appalling. Only the Chatham Islands and Hawke's Bay, which has had a cyclone event and destroyed most of their network, are below us. It is absolutely damning of the agency. And not blaming individuals, but it's just such a deficit, which I have been beating on almost alone at times for some time. And it just needs to, this serious discussion needs to start at the top. This should, I would hope, get almost unanimous support around the country. And I do know a lot of mayors are considering what they're doing with the agency and all government politicians around this. It needs to start somewhere because we're, this is like the waters discussion we're having. We will be having this discussion about the roading network as well. Thank you. I hope you do support it.
Thank you. There's no further comments, so I'd like to invite a vote. That's passed, 12 votes for and none against. Item 15 is our work schedule. There's no need for the manager to speak to any items, but happy to answer any questions if there are any. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just seeking a comment from officers just in respect of item 8, which is the proposed change in reserve classification, OP reserve deliberations report. Is there potential for that to be brought forward?
Somebody would like to answer? That is the next meeting of this committee, as I'm being advised.
Potentially the 28th of June council, maybe, if we have room for business.
There's the 28th of June council meeting. Otherwise, we have recess in July, and this is the next meeting of this committee.
I guess I'm asking whether or not it can come to perhaps another entity, and is that doable from an officer's perspective?
The only meeting would be 28th of June.
Yeah, I understand the only meeting would be the 28th of June, which would be the last council meeting of the financial year. So they're the options. Perhaps if you're comfortable, I can liaise with the Mayor. Mr. Mayor, you and I can see what the...
Mr. Chair, my people will talk to your people.
That sounds great. You
And
happy
I'm very happy with that response. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions on the work schedule? There being none.
Oh, sorry, there's a question from Leone.
Oh, Leone. Thank you.
Councillor Harpeta, sorry.
Yep, Councillor Harpeta, the floor is yours.
Oh, sorry, it's just not on yet. We need to restart.
Okay. Just if you start again, the sound's back now, I believe.
Okay, sorry. The rates review, is that not on your work schedule?
Yes, councillor, that is due to come back, I think it's August.
It's in there as item 19 on the final page.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's still at terms of reference stage. We're not getting any closer to seeing anything.
The intent would be to start bringing back some scenario modelling at that point. So we're working through, if you recall the last time we came forward, we can update that comment, but last time we brought the paper to you was about what we had to do. We're now running some scenarios. In fact, we had started to run some, but we've had to update our thinking a wee bit because of the delay in the three water reform, so that we can give you the most relevant comparisons. So we're doing that right now, so we'll bring that back to you in August.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. No further questions. Now I'd like to invite a vote. Oh, we haven't moved and seconded it. Someone prepared to move it, Councillor Naylor. I'll second it. We'll do the reverse. Invite a vote. Thank you. That's passed, 12 votes for and none against. Could I call on our Deputy Mayor to close this hui with karakia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to my right, I had our wonderful Councillor Bowen come up with a wonderful idea. So it's been a very long time since I've done this. So if anyone's watching, I might get this a bit wrong. Tuia ki ronga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho. Mā te atua tātou katoa e manaaki, manaaki, e tiaki, haumi e hui e tai ki e. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Thank you, members. That concludes our Strategy and Finance meeting today. And I understand the workshop, Mr. Mayor, is still at 2 o'clock, which allows a long lunch.
No, it'll